The morning rush at Cornerstone Coffee was like watching a perfectly choreographed storm. Steam hissed from the espresso machine in rhythmic bursts. Ceramic cups clinked against saucers in an endless percussion, and the constant murmur of hurried conversations created a white noise that somehow managed to be both chaotic and comforting. By 7:30, the line stretched from the counter to the glass doors, filled with the usual suspects of downtown Seattle's business district. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Shun moved behind the counter with the fluid grace of someone who had turned coffee preparation into an art form. Her long black hair was pulled back in a simple bun, secured with what looked like an ordinary hair tie, but was actually paracord wrapped in silk. She wore the standard uniform of black apron over dark jeans and a white button-down. Nothing that would make her stand out in a crowd of baristas across the city. Her makeup was minimal, just enough to highlight features that customers often described as striking. Everything about her appearance suggested someone who had stumbled into food service by accident rather than choice. The regulars had their theories about Maya. She was too polite, too composed, too articulate for someone slinging coffee for a living. Some thought she was an aspiring actress waiting for her big break. Others assumed she was a college student working her way through an expensive degree program. A few of the more cynical customers had decided she was simply coasting on her looks, using charm and a pretty smile to earn tips while avoiding any real responsibility. None of them bothered to look closer. If they had, they might have noticed the way her eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging faces and exits with the systematic attention of someone trained to spot threats. They might have observed how she positioned herself at the espresso machine to maintain clear sight lines to both entrances. They might have wondered why someone making lattes had calluses on her knuckles and a small scar above her left eyebrow that she covered with concealer every morning. The morning crowd surged forward as Maya worked through orders with mechanical efficiency. Double shot Americano for the lawyer who tipped exactly 15% and never made eye contact. Vanilla latte with oat milk for the marketing executive, who spoke loudly into her phone about campaigns that would revolutionize consumer engagement. Cappuccino dry for the investment banker who checked his watch every 30 seconds. Like time was bleeding money directly from his accounts, Maya served them all with the same professional courtesy, her movements economical and precise. She steamed milk to exactly the right temperature, pulled shots with perfect timing, and crafted foam art that turned simple coffee into small works of temporary beauty. To the customers rushing past, she was background scenery, as unremarkable and expected as the chalkboard menu or the potted plants near the windows. That was exactly how she preferred it. The coffee shop itself was one of those deliberately understated places that attracted customers through calculated casualness rather than obvious effort. Exposed brick walls displayed local artwork that rotated monthly. Mismatched furniture created conversation areas that felt organic rather than planned. The lighting was warm enough to be flattering, but bright enough for laptop work. Everything about Cornerstone Coffee suggested authenticity without trying too hard to prove it. Maya had been working there for 8 months, ever since relocating to Seattle for reasons she kept to herself. The owner, Patricia Williams, was a former corporate executive who had left the tech industry to pursue what she called meaningful work. She paid above minimum wage, offered health benefits, and treated her employees like human beings rather than replaceable cogs in a profit machine. It was the kind of job that attracted people who had other options, which made Maya's presence both more believable and more mysterious. The morning rush reached its peak around 8:15 when the nearby office buildings disgorged their residents into the streets. Maya handled the increased volume without visible stress, her hands moving across the equipment with the confidence of someone who had mastered every aspect of the process. She could work 2 machines simultaneously, take orders while pulling shots, and maintain conversation with customers without missing a beat. Dr. Richard Hartwell was the first to arrive that Tuesday morning, as predictable as sunrise. He was a cardiologist at Seattle General, a man in his early 50s, who carried himself with the particular authority that came from regularly making life and death decisions. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suits hand-tailored, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him announced success, competence, and the expectation that the world would arrange itself according to his preferences. He ordered the same thing every morning. Large coffee, black, no sugar, served in a ceramic cup rather than paper, because he claimed it affected the taste. Maya had his order started before he reached the counter, the dark roast already flowing into his preferred mug. Dr. Hartwell barely glanced at her as she set the coffee down, his attention focused on his phone where he was reviewing patient charts with the absorbed concentration of someone whose mistakes had serious consequences. He left exact change on the counter, no tip, and walked to his usual table near the window where he would spend precisely 20 minutes reading medical journals before heading to the hospital. Maya watched him settle into his routine with the detached interest of someone studying a laboratory specimen. Dr. Hartwell represented a particular type she had encountered throughout her various assignments. Intelligent, dedicated, completely absorbed in his own sphere of expertise, and utterly oblivious to anything happening outside his immediate area of concern. Such people made excellent witnesses and terrible security risks. The morning continued its predictable rhythm. Sandra Martinez, the real estate agent who dressed like she was attending board meetings, but spoke like she was still working construction. James Patterson, the freelance graphic designer who ordered complicated drinks with modifications that seemed designed to test the limits of coffee science. Lauren Kim, the startup founder who treated every conversation like a networking opportunity and left business cards on tables like breadcrumbs. Maya served them all with the same professional demeanor, her personality shifting subtly to match what each customer expected from their interaction. For Dr. Hartwell, she was efficient and unobtrusive. For Sandra, friendly but not overly familiar. For James, patient with his elaborate specifications. For Lauren, politely interested in whatever revolutionary app was going to change everything about how people communicated. It was a performance she had perfected over years of practice in environments where blending in meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The ability to become invisible in plain sight, to project whatever image would keep people from looking too closely or asking uncomfortable questions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Around 9:30, the morning rush began to ebb as the business district settled into its daily routine. Maya used the lull to restock supplies, clean equipment, and prepare for the smaller but steadier stream of customers who would carry them through to lunch. She moved through these tasks with the same methodical attention she brought to everything else, her mind automatically categorizing and filing away information about her environment. The coffee shop security was adequate, but not impressive. Cameras covered the main areas but had obvious blind spots. The front door was heavy glass that would slow, but not stop a determined intruder. The back exit led to an alley that connected to 3 different streets, providing multiple escape routes, but also multiple points of potential access. The register held minimal cash, transactions were primarily electronic, and the most valuable items were the espresso machines that would be difficult to move quickly. Maya filed away these observations not because she expected trouble, but because situational awareness had become as automatic as breathing. In her previous life, inattention to details had been a luxury she couldn't afford. Old habits died hard, especially when those habits had kept her alive in places where mistakes were measured in body counts rather than customer complaints. The door chimed as 3 men entered together, their movement pattern immediately catching Maya's attention. They moved like a unit, spacing themselves strategically rather than clustering together like friends or colleagues. The first man headed directly to the counter while the other two positioned themselves near the door and the bathroom hallway. It was a textbook coverage formation, designed to control space and monitor potential threats. Maya's training kicked in automatically, her body language remaining casual while her mind shifted into tactical assessment mode. The lead man was tall and lean with graying hair and the kind of posture that suggested military background. His clothes were business casual, but his shoes were tactical boots disguised as dress shoes. His companions were younger, fitter, and wore the kind of relaxed alertness that came from professional security training. Federal agents, Maya concluded after a 10-second assessment. Probably FBI based on their clothing choices and operational demeanor. The question was whether they were here for the coffee or for something else entirely. The lead agent approached the counter with the measured stride of someone accustomed to command authority. His eyes moved constantly, taking in the layout, the customers, the staff. When he reached Maya, his gaze settled on her face with the intensity of someone comparing her features to a photograph he had memorized. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying the careful neutrality that law enforcement officers used when they weren't sure yet whether someone was a witness, a suspect, or an innocent bystander. "I'll take a medium coffee, black." Maya nodded and turned to the coffee station, her movements remaining fluid and natural, despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. She could feel the agent's eyes on her as she poured, could sense his partners maintaining their positions near the exits. Whatever brought them here, they were taking it seriously. She handed him the coffee and quoted the price, her voice steady and professional. The agent paid with exact change, his fingers brushing hers briefly as he took the cup. The contact seemed accidental, but Maya knew it was deliberate, a technique for gauging stress responses through physical cues. "Thank you," he said, then paused as if deciding whether to say something else. "You know, you look familiar. Have we met before?" Maya's expression remained pleasantly neutral, the same smile she gave to customers who complained about prices or demanded modifications to menu items. "I don't think so," she replied. "I'm pretty good with faces and I'm sure I would remember meeting you." The agent studied her for another moment, then nodded and walked to a table where he could observe both her and the door. His partners followed, taking seats that created overlapping fields of vision covering the entire coffee shop. They weren't being particularly subtle about their presence, which suggested either they didn't care about being noticed, or they wanted to be seen for reasons Maya couldn't yet determine. She continued her routine, serving customers and maintaining the appearance of normal operations while tracking the agent's behavior through peripheral vision. They weren't drinking their coffee or engaging in conversation. They were watching, waiting, evaluating. Classic surveillance posture for people who expected something specific to happen. Maya began running through possibilities in her mind. They could be investigating the coffee shop for money laundering or other financial crimes, though Patricia's books were clean as far as Maya knew. They could be conducting surveillance on one of the regular customers, using the coffee shop as an observation post. Or they could be here for her, though she couldn't imagine what had triggered their interest after months of carefully maintained cover. The morning crowd continued to flow through, oblivious to the federal presence among them. Dr. Hartwell finished his journal reading and left for the hospital. Sandra made her usual rounds of networking calls. James worked on his laptop, with the focused intensity of someone facing a deadline. None of them noticed the three men who sat without talking and watched everything with professional attention. Around 10:15, a fourth man entered the coffee shop. Maya's blood temperature dropped several degrees as she recognized him, though. She kept her expression neutral through years of practiced self-control. Agent David Morrison, FBI Counter-Terrorism Division, someone she had worked with during her previous life in ways that officially never happened. Morrison was older now, his brown hair showing gray at the temples, his face carrying new lines around the eyes. But his walk was the same, that particular stride of someone who had spent years moving through dangerous spaces where confidence and caution had to be perfectly balanced. He wore a charcoal suit that fit well enough to conceal a shoulder holster, and carried himself with the relaxed alertness of someone who was always armed and always ready. He approached the counter alone, leaving his backup team at their table. His eyes met Maya's directly, and she saw recognition there along with something. That might have been surprise or concern. "Hello, Elena," he said quietly, using a name she hadn't heard in 2 years. Maya's hand paused for just a fraction of a second as she reached for a cup, then continued its motion with practiced smoothness. "I'm sorry," she replied, her voice carrying just the right note of polite confusion. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "My name is Maya." Morrison studied her face with the intensity of someone comparing current reality to treasured memories. The last time he had seen Elena Vasquez, she had been disappearing into a crowd at Istanbul's Ataturk airport after completing an operation that had prevented 3 different terrorist attacks across Europe. That was before her cover had been blown, before the death threats, before she had vanished into the witness protection program with a new identity and a promise that her service to her country was finally over. "Is it now?" he said, not quite a question. "Maya Chen, interesting choice." Maya maintained her professional demeanor while her mind raced through contingency plans. Morrison's presence meant her cover had been compromised somehow, though she couldn't determine the source of the breach. More importantly, his approach suggested he wasn't here to arrest her or bring her back into service. If this were an official operation, there would be more agents and less conversation. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, as if they were strangers meeting for the first time rather than former colleagues who had shared foxholes and safe houses across 3 continents. Morrison smiled slightly, the expression carrying years of shared experience and mutual respect. "Information would be good, but I'll settle for coffee. Black, no sugar." Maya poured his coffee with the same efficient movements she used for every customer, though her peripheral vision tracked his team's positions and cataloged potential escape routes. The coffee shop had multiple exits, but all of them were currently under observation. If this went badly, she would need to create her own opportunities. Morrison accepted the coffee and left a $20 bill on the counter for a $4 drink. "Keep the change," he said, "and Elena, we should talk soon." He walked to a table on the opposite side of the coffee shop from his team, positioning himself where their conversation wouldn't be overheard, but could be observed. Maya continued, serving customers and maintaining normal operations while considering her options. Running would confirm his suspicions and bring the full weight of federal law enforcement down on her new life. Staying meant risking exposure to whatever threat had brought Morrison to her door. The coffee shop continued its normal rhythm around them, customers coming and going without awareness that they were witnessing the preliminary moves in a game whose stakes they couldn't begin to understand. Maya served drinks and took payments while tracking Morrison's team and evaluating their tactical positions. They were good, but not extraordinary. Standard FBI surveillance unit, competent but predictable. Patricia Williams emerged from the back office around 11, her usual cheerful energy dimmed by whatever paperwork had been occupying her morning. She was a good boss who trusted her employees and didn't micromanage, which had made Maya's job easier but also made her more vulnerable to exactly this kind of situation. "Everything okay out here?" Patricia asked, her eyes moving over the federal agents with the instinctive wariness of someone who had spent years dealing with corporate investigators and regulatory officials. "Everything's fine," Maya replied. "Just a busy morning." Patricia nodded and returned to her office, but Maya noticed her glancing back through the doorway with obvious concern. Having federal agents conduct surveillance in your business was the kind of thing that could destroy a small company's reputation overnight, regardless of whether any actual wrongdoing was discovered. Morrison finished his coffee and approached the counter again, his movements casual but purposeful. He placed his empty cup on the counter and leaned forward slightly, his voice low enough that only Maya could hear. "There's a situation developing that requires your specific skill set," he said. "People are going to die if we can't stop it, and you're the only person who understands the players involved well enough to identify the threat." Maya continued wiping down the counter with the same methodical attention she had been giving it for the past few minutes. "I'm just a barista," she replied. "I make coffee and take payments. Whatever situation you're dealing with, you need to find someone else to help you." Morrison's expression grew more serious. 3 months ago, Dmitry Volkov escaped from a maximum security facility in Germany. Intelligence suggests he's planning something significant on American soil, and your previous operation against his network makes you the subject matter expert on his methods and resources. Maya's hand stilled for just a moment at the mention of Volkov's name. Dmitry Volkov was a ghost from her previous life, an arms dealer and terrorist facilitator whose network had been responsible for attacks across Europe and the Middle East. She had spent 2 years infiltrating his organization, gathering intelligence that had led to the arrest of 17 cell members and the prevention of multiple planned attacks. Her testimony had put Volkov himself in prison for what was supposed to be the rest of his life. Apparently, life sentences weren't as permanent as advertised. "I read about the escape in the news," Maya said carefully. "Terrible thing. I'm sure law enforcement agencies across Europe are working hard to recapture him." Morrison leaned closer, his voice dropping even lower. "He's not in Europe anymore. Intelligence indicates he's been in the United States for at least 6 weeks, rebuilding his network with the help of local contacts. We've identified 3 possible targets, all of them high-casualty scenarios that would destabilize the economy and kill hundreds of innocent people." Maya resumed her cleaning, her movements steady despite the adrenaline surge that Volkov's name had triggered. She had known this day might come, that her past would eventually catch up with the quiet life she had built in Seattle. But she had hoped for more time, more distance, more opportunity to become someone other than the woman who had spent years living in the shadows of international terrorism. "That sounds like a job for active agents," she replied. "People with current clearances and operational support. Not for someone who makes lattes for a living." Morrison studied her face with the patience of someone who understood that recruitment was a process rather than an event. "You know his methods better than anyone currently in federal service. You understand how he thinks, how he recruits, how he plans operations. Without that knowledge, we're operating blind against someone who has demonstrated remarkable ability to adapt and survive." Maya finished cleaning the counter and moved to the espresso machine, using the familiar routine to buy time while she processed Morrison's request. Returning to her previous life would mean abandoning everything she had built in Seattle. The job, the apartment, the slowly developing friendships with coworkers and customers. The peace of mind that came from knowing her alarm clock was the most dangerous thing she would face on any given day. But it would also mean preventing Volkov from killing innocent people in pursuit of his ideological agenda. She had seen the aftermath of his work before, had walked through crime scenes where his bombs had turned families into statistics and turned children into orphans. Some responsibilities transcended personal preference. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. Morrison nodded and placed a business card on the counter, the same kind of generic card that thousands of federal employees carried. His personal number was written on the back in neat handwriting. "Time is a factor," he said. "But I understand this isn't a decision you can make lightly. Call me when you're ready to talk specifics." He rejoined his team and they left together, their departure as coordinated as their arrival. Maya watched them through the window as they walked to separate vehicles parked at strategic intervals along the street. Professional tradecraft, but not particularly subtle. They wanted her to know she was being watched, wanted to apply psychological pressure through their presence. The coffee shop returned to its normal rhythm after their departure, customers and staff unconsciously relaxing as the federal presence disappeared. Maya continued her routine while her mind processed the implications of Morrison's visit. Volkov's escape changed everything about her carefully constructed new life. Even if she refused to help, her connection to the case made her a potential target for either federal pressure or terrorist retaliation. Patricia emerged from her office again around noon, her expression troubled. "Maya," she said, keeping her voice low. "Those men who were here earlier, they weren't exactly subtle about being law enforcement. Is everything okay?" Maya considered her response carefully. Patricia deserved some explanation, but the full truth would only create problems for both of them. "They think I might have information about something that happened at my previous job," Maya replied. "It's probably nothing, but they have to follow up on every lead." Patricia studied her face with the shrewd attention of someone who had spent years managing corporate crises. "Your previous job wasn't food service, was it?" Maya met her gaze directly. "No, it wasn't." Patricia nodded slowly, the pieces clicking into place. "Government work? Something like that. The kind that doesn't go on resumes or get discussed at dinner." "Parties?" Maya's silence was answer enough. Patricia had been in the corporate world long enough to recognize classified work when she encountered it, even secondhand. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" Patricia asked, her voice carrying genuine concern for an employee she had come to respect and trust. "I don't think so," Maya replied honestly. "But the situation is complicated, and I might need to take some time off to sort it out." Patricia considered this for a moment, then nodded. "You've got vacation time accumulated. Take whatever you need, and Maya, if you need references for whatever comes next, you can count on me. You're the best employee I've ever had." Maya felt an unexpected surge of emotion at Patricia's unconditional support. In her previous life, relationships had been strategic necessities rather than genuine connections. Patricia's offer of help with no questions asked was a reminder of what she stood to lose if she returned to a world where everyone was either an asset or a threat. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." The afternoon passed quietly, the lunch rush bringing its own distractions and challenges. Maya worked through orders and conversations with her usual professional competence, while part of her mind remained focused on Morrison's proposition. She knew Volkov's methods well enough to understand that his patience was tactical rather than personal. If he was planning something in the United States, he would take whatever time was necessary to ensure success. But time was working against the federal agents trying to stop him. Every day Volkov remained free was another day for him to gather resources, recruit assistants, and refine his operational plan. The longer Morrison waited for her answer, the more difficult stopping Volkov would become. Around 3 in the afternoon, Maya noticed a man sitting alone at a corner table who hadn't ordered anything from the counter. He was reading a newspaper and occasionally glancing around the coffee shop with the casual attention of someone passing time. But his positioning gave him clear sight lines to both entrances, and his newspaper hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. Maya approached him with a friendly smile and the offer of assistance. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked. The man looked up with the startled expression of someone caught in uncomfortable contemplation. He was middle-aged with dark hair and nervous energy that suggested he wasn't accustomed to surveillance work. "Oh yes," he said, his accent carrying the slight precision that suggested English wasn't his first language. "Coffee, please." "Black coffee." Maya nodded and returned to the counter, but she kept the man in her peripheral vision as she prepared his order. His posture and demeanor suggested someone under stress, possibly someone being pressured into activities outside his normal experience. When she brought him the coffee, She noticed his hands shaking slightly as he reached for his wallet. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine concern. "You seem nervous about something." The man's eyes darted around the coffee shop before settling on her face. "I am fine," he said, but his tone suggested otherwise, just thinking about work problems. Maya nodded sympathetically and returned to the counter, but she continued to monitor his behavior. Something about his presence felt wrong in a way that went beyond normal surveillance. Morrison's team had been professional but obvious. This man was trying to remain unnoticed, but lacked the training to do so effectively. Around 4 o'clock, the man's nervousness reached a breaking point. He stood abruptly, leaving his coffee half-finished, and walked quickly toward the door. As he passed the counter, Maya heard him mumbling under his breath in what sounded like Russian. Maya's blood went cold as pieces of a puzzle suddenly snapped into place. Volkov's network had always relied on pressure and intimidation to recruit local assets. The nervous man could be someone being coerced into surveillance or reconnaissance, possibly gathering intelligence for an operation against her specifically. She waited until the man disappeared down the street, then pulled out her phone and dialed Morrison's number. "It's Maya," she said when he answered. "We need to talk tonight. And bring everything you have on Volkov's current activities. I think the situation is more urgent than you realized." There was a pause on the other end of the line as Morrison processed the implications of her call. "What changed your mind?" he asked. "Someone just finished conducting surveillance on the coffee shop," Maya replied. "Someone who speaks Russian and lacks professional training. That suggests Volkov knows where I am and is gathering intelligence for something specific." Morrison's voice became sharp with focus. "Are you secure where you are?" "For now," Maya said. "But that could change quickly if Volkov decides I'm a threat that needs to be eliminated rather than an asset that could be turned. Can you get away tonight without arousing suspicion?" Maya glanced around the coffee shop, noting the familiar faces of afternoon customers and the comfortable routine that had defined her life for the past 8 months. "Yes," she said, "but David? Once we meet, there's no going back to this life, is there?" Morrison's silence lasted long enough to provide the answer she had expected. "Probably not," he said finally. "But Alina, if we don't stop Volkov, a lot of innocent people are going to die. People who deserve the chance to live normal lives like the one you've built here." Maya closed her eyes and made the decision she had known was inevitable since Morrison first walked through the door that morning. "Where and when?" she asked. "There's a parking garage at 4th and Pike," Morrison said. "Level 3, northeast corner. 10 o'clock tonight. Come alone and watch for surveillance." "I'll be there," Maya said, then ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Patricia appeared at her elbow a few minutes later. "Everything okay?" she asked, having overheard enough of the conversation to recognize its serious nature. Maya turned to face her boss, this woman who had offered her employment without demanding explanations and friendship without expecting anything in return. "Patricia," she said, "I'm going to need to take that time off starting tomorrow. And depending on how things go, I might not be coming back." Patricia studied her expression with the careful attention of someone reading between lines. "This is about those federal agents this morning, isn't it?" "Among other things," Maya confirmed. Patricia nodded slowly, then reached into her apron and pulled out an envelope. "Your final paycheck," she said. "Plus vacation time and a bonus for being the kind of employee every business owner hopes to find, but rarely does." Maya accepted the envelope with genuine gratitude. "Patricia, I want you to know that this job meant more to me than you probably realize. For 8 months, I got to be someone normal. Someone whose biggest worry was whether the espresso machine would break down during the morning rush." Patricia smiled sadly. "And now you have to go back to being someone whose worries are considerably more serious." "Something like that," Maya confirmed. The two women stood together in comfortable silence, both understanding that some conversations couldn't be completed with words alone. Then Patricia surprised Maya by reaching out and squeezing her hand briefly. "Whatever you're walking into," she said, "be careful. And if you ever need a reference for normal work again, you know where to find me." Maya felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange dreamlike quality as Maya performed familiar tasks while knowing they were likely the last time she would do so. She made drinks, served customers, cleaned equipment, and maintained conversations with the same professional competence she had shown every day for 8 months. But underneath the routine, she was already beginning the mental transition back to Elena Vasquez, the woman who had spent years moving through the shadows of international terrorism. As closing time approached, Maya found herself memorizing details about the coffee shop that she would want to remember later. The way afternoon sunlight slanted through the front windows. The comfortable worn spots on the counter where thousands of transactions had taken place. The familiar hiss and gurgle of the espresso machine that had provided the soundtrack to her civilian life. At 6 o'clock, she locked the front door and finished the closing routine with the same methodical attention she brought to everything else. Patricia had already left for the day, but not before offering one final hug and a reminder that some doors remained open regardless of circumstances. Maya changed out of her work clothes in the employee bathroom, trading the coffee shop uniform for dark jeans, boots, and a jacket that would blend into Seattle's evening crowds. She tied her hair back in a simple ponytail and checked her reflection in the mirror, seeing Elena Vasquez looking back at her for the first time in months. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Elena carried herself differently than Maya, moved with more purpose and awareness. Her eyes held depths that suggested experience with darkness most people never encountered. She was someone who had learned to navigate dangerous spaces where mistakes were measured in body counts rather than customer complaints. Maya Chun had been a carefully constructed identity designed to provide safety and anonymity. Elena Vasquez was the woman underneath, the one who had spent years fighting battles that officially never happened against enemies, whose existence was denied by 3 different government agencies. Tonight, Elena would resurface to face threats that Maya could never have imagined. She left through the back door into the alley behind the coffee shop, taking a moment to look back at the building that had housed her peaceful civilian life. Tomorrow someone else would open the shop and begin serving the morning rush. The rhythm would continue without her. Customers would adapt to new faces behind the counter, and eventually Maya Chun would become a fond memory rather than a daily presence. But tonight, she had work to do. The parking garage at 4th and Pike carried the distinctive smell of concrete dust and motor oil that seemed to permeate every multi-level structure in downtown Seattle. Elena moved through the shadows between parked cars with the careful attention of someone who understood that garages were excellent places for both clandestine meetings and carefully planned ambushes. Her footsteps echoed softly off the concrete walls as she made her way to the 3rd level, each sound seeming amplified in the enclosed space. She arrived 15 minutes early, using the extra time to survey the environment and identify potential complications. The northeast corner was relatively isolated, surrounded by concrete pillars that would provide cover, but also limit escape routes. Security cameras covered the main traffic areas but left blind spots near the structural supports. The stairwells provided multiple exit options, though they could also conceal threats approaching from different directions. Elena positioned herself where she could observe Morrison's approach while maintaining access to her preferred escape route. Old habits from years of operational work guided her choices automatically. Never arrive exactly on time. Always control the terrain. Trust preparation more than luck. Assume every meeting could become a tactical situation requiring immediate action. Morrison appeared precisely at 10 o'clock, emerging from the elevator with the punctual precision of someone whose career had been built on reliability under pressure. He walked alone, though Elena's trained eyes picked out at least two other figures maintaining overwatch positions from different levels of the garage. Standard federal protection protocol for meetings with potentially compromised assets. He approached her position with the measured stride of someone who understood that sudden movements in tense situations could have unintended consequences. Elena remained in the shadows until he reached the designated meeting point, then stepped forward enough to be clearly visible while keeping her back to a concrete pillar. "Elena," Morrison said, his voice carrying genuine relief. "Thank you for coming." She studied his face in the dim lighting, noting the stress lines that hadn't been there during their last operational partnership. Whatever situation had brought him to her door was serious enough to age him visibly in the months since Volkov's escape. "Tell me about the threat," she said without preamble. "Everything you know and everything you suspect." Morrison reached into his jacket and withdrew a tablet, its screen displaying the map of the greater Seattle area. 3 locations were marked with red pins that pulsed ominously against the satellite imagery. Volkov has been rebuilding his network. Using local assets and imported specialists, Morrison began, his voice taking on the clipped efficiency of an operational briefing. "Intelligence suggests he's planning coordinated attacks against high-value targets designed to maximize both casualties and economic disruption." Elena moved closer to examine the map, her mind automatically analyzing the strategic implications of the target selection. The 3 marked locations formed a rough triangle encompassing downtown Seattle, the port facilities, and the technology corridor where most of the major companies maintained their headquarters. "Port of Seattle," she observed, pointing to the waterfront location. "Container terminal with direct access to international shipping lanes. High symbolic value and potential for supply chain disruption." Morrison nodded. "Second target is the federal building downtown. Houses regional offices for multiple agencies, including the FBI field office. Third target is the Amazon campus in South Lake Union. Thousands of employees, significant economic impact, global media attention." Elena studied the tactical geography with the analytical focus that had made her one of the most effective counter-terrorism operatives in federal service. The target selection showed Volkov's evolution as a strategic thinker. Rather than pursuing maximum immediate casualties, he was planning attacks that would create long-term psychological and economic damage. "Timeline," she asked. "Unknown, but intelligence suggests he's in the final stages of preparation. We've identified increased communications activity and movement of personnel that indicates operational planning rather than recruitment and organization." Elena absorbed this information while considering the implications. Volkov's previous operations had been characterized by meticulous planning and redundant contingencies. If he was moving into final preparation phases, they had days rather than weeks to identify and neutralize the threat. "What resources do you have in place?" she asked. Morrison's expression grew grim. "That's part of the problem. Volkov's network includes individuals with insider knowledge of federal law enforcement capabilities. We've had 3 separate surveillance operations compromised in the past month. Someone with access to operational intelligence is feeding information to his organization." Elena felt a familiar chill as the scope of the challenge became clear. Fighting an enemy who could anticipate your moves was like playing chess while your opponent could see your pieces, but you couldn't see theirs. Every tactical advantage became a potential liability when operational security had been compromised. "You think there's a mole in federal law enforcement," she said. "We know there is," Morrison confirmed. "The question is who and how deep the penetration goes. That's why we need someone with your specific background and skill set. Someone who understands Volkov's methods but operates outside normal federal channels." Elena walked to the edge of the parking level, looking out over the city lights that stretched toward the harbor. Somewhere in that maze of streets and buildings, Dmitry Volkov was planning attacks that would shatter the peaceful civilian life she had worked so hard to build. The irony wasn't lost on her that the very tranquility she valued was now under threat from someone whose capture had cost her the possibility of a normal existence. "What's the operational structure?" she asked, turning back to Morrison. "Small team, compartmentalized information, minimal contact with standard federal resources. You would be the primary intelligence asset with operational authority to pursue leads and develop targets as the situation evolves." Elena considered the proposal while weighing the personal costs against the potential consequences of inaction. Returning to operational work meant abandoning the identity she had built and the life she had come to cherish. But allowing Volkov to succeed meant accepting responsibility for the deaths of innocent people who deserved the same chance at peaceful existence she had been privileged to experience. "Who else is on the team?" she asked. Morrison consulted his tablet again, calling up personnel files with photographs and brief biographical summaries. Marcus Rodriguez, former Army Special Forces, currently FBI Hostage Rescue Team. Sarah Chun, no relation despite the shared surname. CIA analyst specializing in international terrorism networks. James Mitchell, an NSA communications specialist with expertise in electronic surveillance and signals intelligence. Elena studied the faces on the screen, automatically categorizing their probable strengths and weaknesses based on their visible characteristics and career backgrounds. Rodriguez would provide tactical capability and operational support. Chun would handle intelligence analysis and strategic assessment. Mitchell would manage electronic warfare and communication security. A small team with complementary skills, she observed. Manageable from a security perspective, but limited in terms of operational capability. Morrison nodded. "We're betting that precision and intelligence will be more effective than overwhelming force, especially when we can't trust normal command and control structures." Elena made her decision with the same methodical analysis she brought to every significant choice. The mathematics were simple, even if the personal cost was enormous. 3 potential targets with thousands of potential casualties, against her desire for continued anonymity and civilian life. The equation balanced itself without requiring extended deliberation. "I'm in," she said, "but I have conditions." Morrison's expression showed relief mixed with professional attention. "Name them." "First, operational autonomy. I make tactical decisions based on field conditions without requiring approval from federal supervisors who might be compromised. Second, full access to intelligence resources including classified databases and surveillance capabilities. Third, protection for Patricia Williams and the other civilians at the coffee shop who might become targets because of their association with my cover identity." Morrison considered her conditions briefly, then nodded. "Agreed on all points. When can you start?" Elena checked her watch, noting that it was nearly 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Her civilian life had ended the moment she walked into this garage. Everything that came next would be measured in operational terms rather than personal preferences. "Now," she said. "Where's the team?" Morrison led her to the stairwell where they descended 2 levels to a parking area that looked identical to every other section of the garage. But when he approached a nondescript sedan and opened the rear door, Elena saw that the vehicle had been modified with communication equipment and surveillance gear that transformed it into a mobile command center. 2 people sat in the front seats, their attention focused on tablet screens displaying real-time intelligence feeds. Elena recognized them from the photographs Morrison had shown her, though seeing them in person provided additional information about their operational capabilities and personal characteristics. Marcus Rodriguez turned as they entered, his movements smooth and controlled in the way that suggested constant readiness for physical action. He was younger than Elena had expected, probably early 30s, with the lean build and alert posture of someone who maintained peak physical condition as a professional requirement. His eyes held the particular depth that came from experiencing violence in service of larger objectives. Sarah Chun looked up from her analysis work with the focused attention of someone accustomed to processing large amounts of complex information under time pressure. She was approximately Elena's age, with the kind of intense intelligence that suggested advanced degrees and years of specialized training. Her workspace was organized with the systematic precision that characterized high-level analytical work. Elena Vasquez, Morrison said by way of introduction. Marcus Rodriguez and Sarah Chun. Rodriguez extended his hand with a firm grip that conveyed both strength and control. "I've read your operational files," he said. "Looking forward to working with someone with your experience and capabilities." Elena shook his hand while assessing his demeanor and bearing. Rodriguez projected competence and reliability, qualities that would be essential in the kind of fluid tactical situation they were likely to encounter. Sarah Chun's handshake was briefer, but equally firm. "Your work against Volkov's European network was exemplary," she said. "The intelligence you developed prevented multiple attacks and degraded his operational capabilities significantly." Elena accepted the compliment with a slight nod while noting that Chun's praise was based on detailed knowledge of classified operations. Either she had been fully briefed on Elena's background, or she had independent access to highly restricted intelligence files. "Where's Mitchell?" Elena asked. "Securing our communications and establishing electronic surveillance on Volkov's known associates," Morrison replied. "He'll join us once the technical infrastructure is in place." Elena slid into the rear seat beside Morrison while Rodriguez drove them out of the garage and into the late-night traffic that moved through downtown Seattle with the steady flow of a city that never completely slept. Streetlights created moving patterns of illumination and shadow as they traveled toward whatever safe house had been established for the operation. The sedan moved through residential neighborhoods that gradually became more industrial, eventually turning into a warehouse district where legitimate businesses operated, alongside enterprises that preferred to avoid excessive government attention. Rodriguez parked behind a building that looked abandoned from the outside, but showed subtle signs of recent occupation when Elena examined it more carefully. The interior had been converted into a functional operations center with workstations for intelligence analysis, communications equipment for secure contact with federal databases, and sleeping areas for team members who might need to remain on site for extended periods. Everything about the setup suggested careful planning and significant financial resources. James Mitchell looked up from a bank of computer monitors as they entered, his attention briefly diverted from the streams of data flowing across multiple screens. He was older than the rest of the team, probably mid-40s, with the pale complexion. An intense focus of someone who spent most of his time in artificial environments, processing electronic information. "Welcome to the party," he said, his voice carrying the slight hoarseness that came from too much coffee and too little sleep. "I've got surveillance packages running on 12 of Volkov's known associates and monitoring systems tracking financial transactions that match his operational patterns." Elena moved to examine the displays, noting the sophisticated level of electronic intelligence gathering that Mitchell had established. Real-time location tracking, communication intercepts, financial transaction monitoring, and social network analysis all fed into a comprehensive picture of Volkov's activities in the Seattle area. "How long has he been here?" she asked. "Best estimate is 6 weeks, Chun replied, consulting her analysis notes. Initial entry was probably through Vancouver, using Canadian documentation, then ground transportation across the border. He's been recruiting local assets and establishing operational infrastructure while maintaining minimal electronic footprint." Elena studied the intelligence summaries while her mind automatically began constructing tactical assessments. Volkov's approach showed the patience and systematic preparation that had made him so dangerous in previous operations. Rather than rushing into attacks with whatever resources were immediately available, he was building the kind of robust operational capability that could adapt to changing circumstances and overcome unexpected obstacles. Current status of the 3 target locations, Alina asked. Shun pulled up additional files on her tablet, displaying security assessments and vulnerability analyzers for each potential target. Port of Seattle has standard commercial security with federal oversight. For international shipping, significant vulnerabilities in perimeter control and cargo screening. Federal building has enhanced security since 9/11, but limited capability for detecting sophisticated explosive devices. Amazon campus relies primarily on corporate security with minimal federal presence. Alina absorbed this information while considering the tactical implications. All 3 targets offered different advantages for different types of attacks. The port provided access to shipping containers that could conceal large explosive devices. The federal building offered high symbolic value and potential for targeting government personnel. The Amazon campus provided maximum civilian casualties and global media attention. Volkov's strategic thinking had evolved since their previous encounters. Instead of focusing on a single large-scale attack, he was apparently planning coordinated strikes that would overwhelm response capabilities and create maximum psychological impact. Rodriguez joined the conversation from his position near the communications equipment. Intelligence suggests he's working with a core team of 4 to 6 specialists, plus local support assets. Professional bomb makers, surveillance specialists, logistics coordinators. People with the kind of skills needed for complex coordinated operations. Alina nodded while continuing to study the intelligence displays. The personnel profile matched Volkov's historical preferences for recruiting experienced professionals, rather than relying on ideologically motivated amateurs. Such teams were more expensive and harder to recruit, but they offered significantly higher probability of operational success. Timeline for the attacks, she asked. Unknown, but several. Indicators suggest acceleration in the past week. Increased communication activity, movement of personnel, acquisition of materials that could be used for explosive device construction. We estimate days rather than weeks before he moves into execution phase. Alina felt the familiar weight of operational responsibility settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Every hour they spent analyzing intelligence was an hour Volkov could use to refine his plans and eliminate vulnerabilities. Time was working against them in ways that made every decision critical and every mistake potentially catastrophic. I need to see the target locations personally, she said. First-hand assessment of security measures, vulnerability patterns, potential countermeasures. And I need detailed analysis of Volkov's known associates, particularly anyone who might have insider access to federal law enforcement activities. Shun nodded and began pulling up additional files. I've prepared comprehensive briefing materials on each target location, including architectural plans, security protocols, and recent threat assessments. For Volkov's associates, I have background information on 37 individuals with confirmed or suspected connections to his network. Alina reviewed the associate profiles with the systematic attention of someone hunting for patterns that might reveal operational planning. Names, photographs, personal histories, known skills, previous criminal activities, current locations. When available, the information painted a picture of a network that combined international expertise with local knowledge in ways that made traditional counter-terrorism approaches less effective. One profile caught her attention immediately. Viktor Petrov, identified as a communications specialist with expertise in electronic surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques. His background included training by Russian military intelligence and employment by private security firms that served clients who preferred to avoid government attention. Petrov was the nervous man from the coffee shop, Alina realized with cold certainty. the individual who had conducted amateur surveillance while struggling to conceal his discomfort with the assignment. Volkov was using him for reconnaissance, while probably planning to eliminate him once his usefulness ended. This one, she said, pointing to Petrov's profile. I've seen him. He conducted surveillance on the coffee shop yesterday afternoon. Amateur execution, but positioned to gather intelligence on my daily routine and potential vulnerabilities. Morrison leaned forward to examine the profile. Petrov has been in Seattle for 2 weeks according to our tracking. Previous location was Portland, where he spent 3 days before moving north. No known criminal history in the United States, but suspected involvement in industrial espionage operations in Europe. Elena continued studying Petrov's information while considering the tactical implications of his surveillance activities. If Volkov was gathering intelligence on her personally, it suggested either he viewed her as a threat to be eliminated or an asset to be recruited. Given their previous history, elimination seemed more probable. He knows I'm here, she said. The surveillance wasn't random. Volkov has identified my location and is probably planning either to kill me or use me as leverage against federal law enforcement activities. Rodriguez's expression grew more serious. That changes our operational security requirements significantly. If Volkov knows where you've been working, he might have intelligence on other aspects of your cover identity. Elena nodded while running through implications in her mind. Her apartment, her daily routines, her relationships with Patricia, and other civilians who had become part of her cover life. All of them could now be considered potential targets or sources of leverage that Volkov might attempt to exploit. We need to establish protective surveillance on the coffee shop and other locations associated with my cover identity, she said. And we need to assume that Volkov has more intelligence about federal operations than we previously estimated. Chun pulled up additional analysis materials on her tablet. If Petrov is conducting surveillance for operational planning, we might be able to use that activity to identify other members of Volkov's network. Electronic monitoring of his communications could provide insight into the overall structure and timeline. Elena considered this possibility while weighing the risks against potential intelligence benefits. Using Petrov as an unwitting source of information could provide valuable insight into Volkov's planning. But it also required maintaining her cover identity long enough for the surveillance to produce actionable intelligence. Mitchell looked up from his computer monitors with the expression of someone who had discovered something significant in his electronic monitoring activities. We've got movement on 3 of Volkov's financial networks, he said. Large cash transactions through money transfer services, purchases of industrial equipment that could be used for bomb making, and rental agreements for storage facilities in locations that provide access to all 3 target areas. Elena moved to examine Mitchell's displays, noting the pattern of financial activity that suggested operational preparation rather than preliminary planning. Volkov was moving from theoretical planning into practical implementation, acquiring the resources and infrastructure needed to execute coordinated attacks. How much time do we have? She asked. Mitchell consulted multiple data streams before responding. Based on the acceleration of financial activity and communications patterns, probably 72 hours before he moves into final execution phase. Maybe less if external factors force him to accelerate his timeline. Elena felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied transition from analysis to operational implementation. 72 hours to identify, locate, and neutralize a terrorist network that had been planning coordinated attacks for weeks. The mathematics were challenging, but not impossible if they could maintain operational tempo and avoid the kind of mistakes that gave targets time to adapt and escape. We start with Petrov, she said. Electronic surveillance to identify his current location and communication patterns, then physical surveillance to map his activities and identify other network members. Once we have the operational structure mapped, we can begin targeted disruption activities. Morrison nodded in agreement. What do you need from federal resources? Surveillance teams, electronic monitoring capabilities, tactical support for when we identify target locations. And most importantly, compartmentalized information flow to minimize the risk of intelligence compromise through the suspected mole. Rodriguez began pulling up tactical planning materials on his tablet. I can coordinate with hostage rescue team. Assets for tactical support, but we'll need to be careful about operational security and information compartmentalization. Elena studied the team members around her while considering the scope of the challenge they faced. 4 people with complementary skills against a network of experienced professionals who had been planning coordinated attacks for weeks. The odds were not encouraging, but they were working with the advantage of surprise and the motivation of preventing mass casualties. Chun looked up from her analysis work with an expression of concern. There's something else we need to consider, she sighed. Volkov's previous operations have included contingency plans for law enforcement interference. If he suspects we've identified his network, he might accelerate his timeline or shift to alternative targets. Elena nodded, recognizing the strategic dilemma that characterized all counter-terrorism operations. Moving too quickly risked alerting the target and prompting changes that could make the threat harder to track and neutralize. Moving too slowly risked allowing the attacks to proceed as planned. We balance speed with stealth, she said. Electronic surveillance and intelligence gathering until we have enough information to act decisively. Then coordinated strikes against all network elements simultaneously to prevent escape or retaliation. Mitchell's monitoring equipment began emitting soft alerts as new information appeared on his screens. We've got communication activity from 3 of Volkov's known associates, he said. Encrypted messages, but the pattern suggests coordination of some kind of time-sensitive activity. Elena moved to examine the communication intercepts while her mind began processing the tactical implications. If Volkov's network was accelerating their activities, it suggested either they had detected federal interest or they were moving into final operational phases ahead of schedule. Can you break the encryption? She asked Mitchell. Working on it, he replied, his fingers moving rapidly across multiple keyboards. Standard commercial encryption software with some custom modifications. Should be able to crack it given enough processing time, but might take several hours. Elena considered their options while monitoring the flow of new intelligence across Mitchell's displays. Every piece of information brought them closer to understanding Volkov's operational planning. But time was working against them in ways that made patience a luxury they couldn't afford. Keep working on the encryption, she told Mitchell. But we can't wait for complete intelligence before taking action. Rodriguez, I need surveillance teams positioned on Petrov and any other associates we can locate. Chun, continue analysis on target locations and possible attack methodologies. She turned to Morrison with the expression of someone transitioning into operational command mode. And David, I need you to coordinate with federal resources while maintaining operational security. If there is a mole feeding information to Volkov, we can't risk exposing our activities until we're ready to move against the entire network simultaneously. Morrison nodded with the understanding of someone who had worked enough operations to recognize the critical transition from planning to implementation. What's your timeline for action? Elena considered the variables while calculating optimal timing for maximum effectiveness. 24 hours for intelligence gathering and tactical preparation, she said. Then coordinated strikes against all known network elements. If we wait longer, we risk losing the initiative. If we move sooner, we risk acting without sufficient information. The team settled into operational rhythm with the practiced efficiency of professionals who understood that their next few hours could determine whether hundreds of innocent people lived or died. Elena found herself transitioning back into the mindset that had defined her previous life, where personal considerations were subordinated to mission requirements and success was measured in lives saved rather than individual satisfaction. Mitchell's equipment continued monitoring electronic communications, while his decryption programs worked to break Volkov's encrypted messages. Chun analyzed intelligence reports and refined her assessments of target vulnerabilities. Rodriguez coordinated with tactical support teams while maintaining operational security protocols. Elena reviewed everything they knew about Volkov's network while constructing tactical plans for different scenarios. The familiar weight of operational responsibility settled around her like a cloak she had never wanted to wear, again but couldn't refuse when innocent lives were at stake. Outside the warehouse, Seattle continued its nightly rhythm, unaware that somewhere in the darkness, people were planning attacks that would shatter the city's sense of security and safety. In a few hours, the morning commute would begin, carrying thousands of people to jobs and lives they assumed would continue indefinitely. Elena intended to make sure those assumptions proved correct, regardless of what it cost her personally. The electronic monitoring equipment emitted another series of alerts as new communications traffic appeared on Mitchell's screens. Volkov's network was accelerating their activities, which meant her team's window for preventive action was closing faster than anticipated. "Time to go to work," she said quietly, and the hunt for Dmitry Volkov began in earnest. Dawn broke over Seattle with the kind of gray overcast that made the city famous. But Elena had been awake for hours watching surveillance feeds and analyzing communication intercepts that painted an increasingly urgent picture of Volkov's operational timeline. Mitchell's decryption efforts had finally broken through the encryption, protecting the terrorist network's communications, revealing a level of operational sophistication that exceeded their initial assessments. The intercepted messages indicated coordinated timing for all three attacks, with execution planned for the following morning during peak commuter hours when maximum casualties could be achieved. More troubling was the discovery that Volkov had developed contingency plans for federal law enforcement interference, including specific countermeasures designed to neutralize the kind of small-team operations Elena's group represented. Rodriguez finished reviewing tactical intelligence from overnight surveillance activities, his expression grim as he compiled reports from multiple federal assets positioned around Seattle. "We've confirmed locations for 6 of Volkov's associates," he said, pointing to marked positions on a digital map of the metropolitan area. But 3 of the core operational specialists remain unaccounted for, including Volkov himself. Elena studied the surveillance reports while calculating tactical options for simultaneous strikes against multiple targets spread across a large geographic area. Standard federal response would involve coordinating with local law enforcement and deploying overwhelming force to each location. But the suspected mole in federal law enforcement meant such coordination could alert Volkov to their activities and prompt escape or acceleration of the attack timeline. Chun looked up from her analysis workstation where she had been correlating financial transactions with personnel movements to identify operational patterns. The money trail shows significant purchases of industrial explosives and electronic timing devices over the past week, she reported. Quantities suggest shaped charges designed for structural damage rather than area effect anti-personnel devices. Elena processed this information while visualizing the target locations and their structural vulnerabilities. Shaped charges indicated Volkov was planning to bring down buildings or critical infrastructure rather than simply maximizing immediate casualties. Such attacks would create long-term economic damage and psychological trauma that extended far beyond the immediate death toll. Mitchell's communication monitoring equipment began emitting urgent alerts as new traffic appeared on networks associated with Volkov's operation. "Real-time coordination between multiple cell phones," he announced, his voice tight with concentration. "Pattern suggests final preparation activities and timing coordination." Elena moved to examine the communication intercepts. noting the increased volume and urgency that characterized operational networks transitioning from planning to execution. Whatever timeline Volkov had originally established was being accelerated, probably in response to signs of federal interest in his activities. "How much time do we have?" she asked Mitchell. "Based on communication patterns and timing references in the intercepted messages, probably 12 hours before the attacks begin," he replied. "Maybe less if they detect our surveillance activities." Elena felt the familiar surge of operational adrenaline as the situation transitioned from intelligence gathering to crisis response. 12 hours to identify, locate, and neutralize a terrorist network that had been planning coordinated attacks for weeks. The mathematics were daunting, but not impossible if they could maintain operational tempo and avoid the kind of mistakes that allowed targets to escape or adapt. Morrison emerged from the secure communication booth where he had been coordinating with federal supervisors, while maintaining compartmentalized information flow to prevent intelligence leaks. His expression carried the strain of someone balancing operational requirements with bureaucratic constraints. "I've got authorization for tactical support from hostage rescue team assets," he reported, "but coordination has to be handled through compartmentalized channels to prevent compromise. We're operating with a team of 12 specialists who will take direction from field commanders, without prior briefing on operational objectives." Elena nodded while considering the implications of working with tactical support teams who lacked full situational awareness. Professional competence could compensate for limited briefing, but complex operations requiring split-second coordination were always more effective when all participants understood the complete tactical picture. Rodriguez consulted his tactical planning materials while reviewing deployment options for simultaneous strikes against multiple targets. "We can hit 4 locations simultaneously with available resources," he said. "But that leaves 2 confirmed associates unaccounted for, plus Volkov himself and any operational specialists we haven't identified." Elena studied the tactical map while weighing operational priorities against available resources. Standard counter-terrorism doctrine emphasized eliminating the leadership element first, then degrading operational capabilities through systematic targeting of specialists and infrastructure. But Volkov's network was structured to continue functioning even if key personnel were captured or killed. "We prioritized the bomb makers and logistics coordinators," she decided. "Without technical specialists, Volkov can't execute coordinated attacks regardless of his strategic planning. Leadership targets are secondary unless we can confirm Volkov's location and eliminate him along with his operational capability." Chun pulled up detailed analysis of personnel profiles and operational roles within Volkov's network. According to intercepted communications, the primary bomb maker is operating from a warehouse facility in the industrial district south of downtown. Secondary explosive specialist is working from a residential location in Bellevue. Both are essential for final device preparation and deployment. Elena examined the locations while calculating tactical approaches and potential complications. Industrial warehouses offered space for large-scale bomb construction but also provided multiple escape routes and opportunities for defensive positioning. Residential areas limited collateral damage but increased the risk of civilian casualties if tactical operations went wrong. Mitchell's monitoring equipment detected another surge of communication activity as Volkov's network continued final preparations. Encrypted coordination between mobile devices suggests personnel movement and equipment transportation, he reported. Pattern indicates transition from preparation to deployment phase. Elena made the tactical decision that would define the next 12 hours and potentially determine whether hundreds of innocent people lived or died. "We move in 2 phases, she announced. First wave targets the bomb makers and technical specialists to degrade operational capability. Second wave targets logistics coordinators and support personnel to prevent escape or retaliation." Rodriguez began coordinating tactical deployments while maintaining compartmentalized communication protocols to prevent intelligence leaks. Hostage rescue team elements would provide overwhelming force at each location while Elena's team maintained operational command and control. Morrison returned to his secure communication booth to coordinate federal resources without exposing operational details to potentially compromised personnel. The suspected mole in federal law enforcement remained unidentified, which meant every communication represented a potential security breach that could alert Volkov to their activities. Elena reviewed intelligence summaries one final time while preparing for transition to field operations. Her role would shift from analytical coordinator to tactical commander, responsible for making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Shun compiled final intelligence packages for each target location, including architectural plans, surveillance data, and assessed threat levels. The warehouse facility showed signs of extensive modification that could indicate defensive preparations or bomb construction activities. The residential location appeared ordinary from external surveillance, but financial records showed utility, usage patterns consistent with high-energy industrial activities. Rodriguez finished tactical coordination and approached Elena with deployment options for consideration. We can insert simultaneously at all locations, using helicopter transport for speed and surprise, he proposed. Or we can use ground approach for stealth, but accept longer deployment times that increase the risk of target escape. Elena weighed the tactical options while considering Volkov's likely countermeasures and response capabilities. Helicopter insertion would achieve surprise and speed, but would also alert all targets simultaneously to federal activities. Ground approach would maintain stealth longer, but might allow targets to detect surveillance and escape before tactical teams could reach their locations. Ground approach to primary targets, she decided. Helicopter assets standing by for rapid deployment if targets attempt to flee or if we need immediate tactical support. Priority is preventing bomb deployment even if some personnel escape. Mitchell continued monitoring communication intercepts while tracking the movement of electronic devices associated with Volkov's network. 3 mobile devices have gone silent in the past hour, he reported with concern. Either they've been turned off deliberately or they've been replaced with clean communication equipment. Elena recognized the pattern as standard operational security for networks transitioning to execution phase. Volkov was eliminating electronic signatures that could be used for tracking while maintaining minimal communication capability for final coordination. The communication silence indicated they were entering the window where preventive action would become impossible. Time to move, she announced, and the warehouse operations center transformed into controlled chaos as team members gathered equipment and prepared for deployment to their respective target locations. Elena would accompany the tactical team targeting the primary bomb maker at the warehouse facility, bringing her expertise in Volkov's methods and her knowledge of improvised explosive device construction to bear on what was likely the most critical target. Rodriguez would coordinate tactical operations across all locations while maintaining communication with federal support assets. Shun would remain at the operations center, providing real-time intelligence analysis and coordination with electronic surveillance assets. Mitchell would continue monitoring communication intercepts and electronic tracking systems that might reveal additional targets or changes in operational timing. Morrison would maintain coordination with federal supervisors while managing information flow to prevent compromise through the suspected mole. His role required balancing operational requirements with bureaucratic oversight in ways that kept the mission moving forward, without exposing tactical details to potentially hostile intelligence. The tactical team assembled in the warehouse loading area consisted of Elena and 3 hostage rescue team specialists whose experience with high-risk operations showed in their systematic equipment checks and professional demeanor. They carried breaching charges, flashbang grenades, and automatic weapons designed for close quarters. Combat in environments where split-second timing could determine mission success. Elena checked her personal equipment with the methodical attention that years of operational experience had made automatic. Body armor designed to stop rifle rounds while maintaining mobility. Communication equipment for coordination with tactical teams at other locations. Electronic devices for photographing intelligence materials and technical equipment that might provide insight into bomb construction methods. The drive to the warehouse district took them through industrial areas that were largely deserted during early morning hours, providing tactical advantages in terms of reduced civilian presence, but also offering multiple escape routes for targets who might detect their approach. Elena studied the route while visualizing tactical options for different scenarios they might encounter. Rodriguez's voice came through their communication system as all tactical teams reported ready for coordinated deployment. All units in position, he announced. Primary target shows signs of activity with multiple vehicles present and lights indicating ongoing work inside the facility. Elena acknowledged the report while reviewing architectural plans for the warehouse. One final time. The building was single-story construction with multiple loading dock entrances and office areas that could provide defensive positions for armed resistance. Intelligence suggested the presence of significant quantities of explosive materials that could be used as improvised weapons if Volkov's personnel chose to fight rather than surrender. The tactical team approached the warehouse through an adjacent industrial facility that provided concealment until they reached the target perimeter. Elena used night vision equipment to observe the building while noting security measures and potential entry points that offered the best combination of surprise and tactical advantage. Two vehicles parked near the main loading dock showed signs of recent use and heavy loading, suggesting transportation activities consistent with bomb deployment preparation. Lights were visible through high windows indicating active work inside the facility despite the early morning hour. Elena's communication system crackled with reports from tactical teams at other locations. Residential target shows minimal activity with single vehicle present and lights in basement area suggesting ongoing work. Industrial storage facility has multiple vehicles and personnel movement consistent with logistics operations. She coordinated final approach timing to ensure simultaneous tactical action that would prevent targets from warning each other or escaping once federal operations began. The element of surprise was their greatest tactical advantage and could only be used once before Volkov's entire network adapted to federal interference. Mitchell's voice came through the communication system with urgency that indicated developing complications. Electronic surveillance shows communication spike from multiple devices associated with Volkov's network, he reported. Pattern suggests either final coordination before attack execution or response to detected federal activities. Elena made the tactical decision that would define the next few minutes and potentially determine mission success or failure. All units execute immediately, she commanded. Target escape becomes secondary priority to preventing bomb deployment. The warehouse entry began with breaching charges that destroyed the main loading dock door in a controlled explosion designed to disorient defenders, while providing tactical teams with rapid access to the interior. Elena followed the hostage rescue team specialists through the breach with her weapon ready, and her mind focused on identifying threats and intelligence targets. The warehouse interior was organized like a professional bomb-making facility with workbenches, chemical storage areas, and electronic equipment arranged for efficient assembly of large explosive devices. Multiple partially assembled bombs were visible along with enough raw materials to construct devices capable of bringing down major buildings. Two men near the far wall of the warehouse responded to the federal assault by attempting to reach weapons stored on a nearby workbench. The hostage rescue team specialists neutralized both targets with precisely aimed gunfire that eliminated the threat while preserving potential intelligence sources. Elena moved through the facility while cataloging the bomb-making equipment and materials present. The sophistication level exceeded intelligence estimates, with electronic timing devices in shaped charge configurations that suggested Volkov had recruited specialists with military or professional demolitions experience. One workbench held 3 completed explosive devices designed for structural demolition, each device large enough to bring down significant portions of the target buildings. Another area contained partially assembled timing mechanisms and remote detonation equipment that could allow coordinated attacks across multiple locations. Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system with reports from other tactical teams. Residential targets secured with 2 subjects in custody and significant bomb-making materials recovered. Industrial storage facility shows signs of recent evacuation with vehicles and personnel departed before tactical team arrival. Elena photographed the bomb-making equipment while searching for intelligence materials that might reveal additional targets or provide insight into Volkov's overall operational planning. Document folders contained architectural plans for all 3 target locations along with detailed timing schedules for coordinated attacks planned for the following morning. Mitchell's electronic surveillance detected renewed communication activity from devices associated with Volkov's network. Communication spike suggests coordination of emergency response to federal operations, he reported. Multiple devices activating simultaneously after period of silence. Elena realized that despite their tactical success in degrading Volkov's bomb-making capability, the primary target remained at large with enough remaining resources to potentially execute modified attacks. The warehouse facility had been important, but not decisive in neutralizing the overall threat. She coordinated extraction from the warehouse while tactical teams at other locations completed their operations and prepared for potential secondary missions. The immediate threat had been reduced but not eliminated, requiring continued operations to locate and neutralize Volkov himself along with any remaining operational specialists. Chun's voice came through the communication system with intelligence. Analysis based on materials recovered from all 3 tactical sites. Document analysis shows reference to a 4th location not previously identified, she reported. Financial records indicate rental of maritime facility with access to port operations and container shipping. Elena processed this information while considering the tactical implications of a previously unknown operational site. Maritime facilities offered access to international shipping lanes and potential for attacks against port infrastructure that could disrupt regional commerce for months. Rodriguez coordinated redeployment of tactical assets toward the newly identified maritime facility while maintaining operational security to prevent intelligence leaks through the suspected federal mole. The 4th location represented either a backup operational site or an additional target that Volkov had concealed from normal intelligence gathering. Morrison's coordination with federal supervisors provided authorization for expanded operations while maintaining compartmentalized information flow to prevent compromise. The maritime facility fell under different jurisdictional authorities that required careful coordination to prevent bureaucratic delays that could allow targets to escape. Elena's tactical team redeployed toward the port district while Chun provided real-time intelligence analysis of the newly discovered location. The maritime facility was registered to a shipping company with connections to international cargo operations that provided legitimate cover for terrorist activities. Mitchell's electronic surveillance showed continued communication activity between mobile devices that suggested coordination of emergency response measures. Pattern indicates personnel extraction and operational security procedures consistent with network under federal pressure, he reported. Elena understood that Volkov's network was adapting to federal interference by implementing contingency plans designed to preserve operational capability despite tactical losses. The maritime facility might represent a final attempt to execute modified attacks using remaining resources and personnel. The port district presented different tactical challenges than the warehouse and residential locations they had previously targeted. Maritime facilities were designed for efficient movement of large cargo containers, providing multiple escape routes and opportunities for defensive positioning among heavy industrial equipment. Elena's tactical team approached the maritime facility through adjacent shipping areas that provided concealment while offering observation of target activities. The facility showed signs of recent activity with vehicles parked near warehouse buildings and lights, indicating ongoing work despite the early morning hour. Chun's intelligence analysis revealed that the maritime facility had been modified with additional security measures, including surveillance cameras and perimeter barriers that exceeded normal commercial requirements. Such modifications suggested either valuable cargo operations or activities that required protection from unwanted observation. Rodriguez coordinated tactical deployment while maintaining communication with federal assets positioned throughout the port district. The maritime environment required different tactical approaches than urban or industrial targets due to the presence of heavy machinery and potential for collateral damage to shipping operations. Elena observed the maritime facility while noting security measures and potential entry points that offered tactical advantages. Multiple warehouse buildings connected by internal roadways provided numerous opportunities for targets to move between defensive positions during tactical operations. Mitchell's electronic surveillance detected communication activity from devices inside the maritime facility that suggested final coordination of some kind of time-sensitive operation. Electronic signatures indicate multiple devices active simultaneously, with message traffic consistent with operational planning rather than emergency response. Elena made the tactical assessment that defined their approach to what might be Volkov's final operational location. The communication activity suggested either preparation for immediate attack execution or coordination of escape and relocation to alternative facilities. All units prepare for simultaneous assault on multiple buildings, she commanded. Priority targets are personnel and any explosive devices ready for deployment. Secondary priority is intelligence materials and communication equipment that might reveal additional operational sites. The maritime facility assault began with coordinated breaching of 3 separate warehouse buildings to prevent targets from consolidating defensive positions or escaping through internal connections between structures. Elena accompanied the team targeting the primary warehouse where electronic surveillance suggested the highest level of activity. The warehouse interior contained a maritime version of the bomb-making facility they had discovered at the industrial location. Explosive devices were concealed inside shipping containers, designed to blend with normal port cargo operations. Electronic timing equipment was configured for remote detonation that could be triggered from outside the immediate target area. But most significantly, Elena discovered evidence that Volkov himself had been using the maritime facility as his primary operational headquarters. Personal effects, communication equipment, and planning materials indicated recent presence of the network's leadership element. Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system with reports from tactical teams at the other warehouse buildings. 2 facilities secured with explosive devices and bomb-making materials recovered, he reported. 3rd facility shows signs of recent evacuation with warm vehicles and evidence of hasty departure. Elena searched the primary warehouse for intelligence materials that might reveal Volkov's current location or alternative operational sites. Document analysis showed planning for attacks beyond the 3 previously identified targets, including port infrastructure and transportation systems that could create cascading economic damage throughout the region. Chun's intelligence analysis of materials recovered from all 4 operational sites painted a comprehensive picture of Volkov's strategic planning. Network structure shows redundant capabilities and alternative sites that suggest preparation for extended campaign rather than single coordinated attack, she reported through the communication system. Elena realized that despite their tactical success in degrading Volkov's immediate operational capability, they had uncovered evidence of a more extensive terrorist campaign designed to continue over weeks or months. The immediate threat had been reduced but not eliminated, requiring continued operations to identify and neutralize remaining network elements. Mitchell's electronic surveillance detected new communication activity from devices not previously associated with Volkov's network. Pattern suggests activation of backup communication systems and coordination with previously dormant operational cells, he reported with concern. Elena understood that Volkov was implementing contingency plans designed to maintain operational capability despite significant losses in personnel and equipment. The network's resilience exceeded intelligence estimates and suggested preparation for exactly the kind of federal interference they had encountered. Morrison's coordination with federal supervisors provided additional resources for extended operations while maintaining operational security to prevent intelligence compromise through the suspected mole. The scope of Volkov's network required sustained effort rather than single tactical strikes to achieve decisive neutralization. Elena's communication system received priority alert from Chun's Intelligence Analysis Center with information that changed the tactical situation dramatically. Electronic intercept from backup communication device shows Volkov attempting to coordinate immediate attack against federal building using remaining explosive devices and personnel, she reported urgently. Elena processed this information while calculating response options with severely limited time for deployment and coordination. Volkov was apparently attempting to execute at least partial attacks using whatever resources remained available after federal operations against his primary facilities. All available tactical assets redeploy to federal building immediately, she commanded. Threat assessment indicates imminent attack using improvised explosive devices and remaining network personnel. Time factor critical for preventing casualties. The redeployment to downtown Seattle required coordination between multiple tactical teams, while maintaining operational security to prevent alerting Volkov to federal awareness of his modified attack planning. Elena's team traveled through early morning traffic that was beginning to build as the city prepared for another day of normal civilian activities. Chun's continued analysis of intercepted communications provided real-time intelligence on Volkov's activities as his network attempted to execute desperate attacks with degraded resources. Electronic surveillance shows two vehicles approaching federal building perimeter with electronic signatures consistent with explosive device transportation, she reported. Elena coordinated with building security to implement evacuation procedures while tactical teams positioned themselves to intercept the vehicle-borne explosive devices before they could reach their intended targets. Federal building security had been enhanced since previous terrorist attacks, but remained vulnerable to sophisticated assault by determined attackers. Rodriguez deployed tactical assets to create perimeter control around the federal building while maintaining coordination with local law enforcement agencies that could provide additional resources for traffic control and civilian evacuation. The urban environment presented complications not encountered in industrial or maritime target areas. Elena's tactical team approached the federal building through adjacent office buildings that provided concealment while offering observation of vehicle approaches and potential attack routes. Early morning commuter traffic provided both cover for tactical deployment and increased risk for civilian casualties if operations went wrong. Mitchell's electronic surveillance tracked the approaching vehicles while providing real-time updates on their location and probable timing for reaching the federal building. Electronic signatures confirm presence of large explosive devices in both vehicles, he reported. Estimated arrival at target location within 15 minutes. Alina made the tactical decision that would determine whether federal law enforcement could prevent the attack or would be forced to respond to its aftermath. "Intercept vehicles before they reach target perimeter," she commanded. "Priority is preventing detonation near building or civilian concentrations." The vehicle intercept operation required precise timing and coordination to stop the explosive-laden vehicles without triggering premature detonation that could cause significant casualties among responding tactical personnel. Alina's team positioned themselves at choke points that would force the vehicles into killing zones where they could be disabled by precisely aimed gunfire. The first vehicle approached through downtown traffic with the careful driving of someone attempting to avoid attention while transporting dangerous cargo. Elena's team waited until the vehicle entered their designated intercept zone before opening fire with precision shots designed to disable the engine and stop forward movement without hitting explosive cargo. The driver of the first vehicle responded to the tactical assault by attempting to accelerate toward the federal building, despite engine damage from gunfire. Alina made the split-second decision to use concentrated fire to stop the vehicle permanently, accepting the risk of explosive detonation to prevent the device from reaching its intended target. The vehicle stopped approximately 200 meters from the federal building after sustained gunfire disabled both the engine and the driver. Elena's team approached with extreme caution while bomb disposal specialists prepared to examine and neutralize the explosive device loaded in the vehicle. Cargo area. Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system with reports on the second vehicle intercept. "Second vehicle stopped with driver in custody and explosive device secured," he reported. "Device appears to be improvised construction, but with significant destructive capability." Alina coordinated tactical sweep of the area around both intercepted vehicles while searching for additional threats or network personnel who might attempt to detonate the explosive devices remotely. The successful intercept had prevented immediate attacks, but Volkov himself remained at large with unknown remaining operational capability. Chun's intelligence analysis of communication intercepts revealed continuing coordination attempts between devices associated with Volkov's network. Electronic activity suggests attempts to coordinate backup attack plans using remaining personnel and resources, she reported. Pattern indicates desperation rather than systematic operational planning. Alina understood that Volkov's network had been degraded to the point where continued attacks would require increasingly desperate measures with correspondingly higher probability of failure. But desperate terrorists could still cause significant casualties, even with improvised resources and reduced operational capability. Mitchell's electronic surveillance detected new communication activity from a device not previously associated with Volkov's network. Mobile device shows movement pattern consistent with surveillance of law enforcement activities around federal building, he reported. Device location suggests observation from elevated position in adjacent office building. Alina realized that Volkov might be personally conducting surveillance of federal operations while planning additional attacks, using whatever resources remained available. His presence in the immediate area created both an opportunity for capture and a risk of additional improvised attacks against tactical personnel. Rodriguez coordinated tactical teams to sweep adjacent office buildings while maintaining perimeter security around the intercepted explosive devices. Building search operations in urban environments required careful coordination to prevent civilian casualties while locating potential threats among normal business activities. Elena's team approached the office building where electronic surveillance had detected the suspicious communication device. Building security provided access while evacuation procedures cleared civilian personnel from areas that might become tactical zones if armed resistance was encountered. The systematic search revealed that Volkov had been using an abandoned office space on the 10th floor as an observation post equipped with communication gear and surveillance equipment. Personal effects in recent food containers indicated extended presence during federal operations against his network. But Volkov himself had apparently departed before tactical teams reached his location, leaving behind intelligence materials that provided insight into his contingency planning and potential escape routes. Document analysis showed preparation for extended terrorist campaign with multiple backup operational sites throughout the Pacific Northwest. Chun's analysis of recovered materials revealed the scope of Volkov's strategic planning, which extended far beyond the immediate Seattle area. Network infrastructure includes operational cells in Portland, Vancouver, and San Francisco, she reported. Intelligence suggests preparation for coordinated attacks across multiple metropolitan areas. Elena absorbed this information while considering the implications for continued counter-terrorism operations. Neutralizing Volkov's Seattle network had been successful in preventing immediate attacks, but had also revealed a terrorist infrastructure that required sustained federal attention across multiple jurisdictions. Morrison's coordination with federal supervisors provided authorization for expanded operations while maintaining compartmentalized information flow to prevent intelligence compromise. The scope of Volkov's network required coordination between multiple field offices and federal agencies with different operational capabilities and jurisdictional authorities. Elena reviewed intelligence summaries from all tactical operations. While assessing the overall success of their mission against Volkov's immediate threat, they had successfully prevented coordinated attacks against 3 high-value targets and neutralized significant operational capability, including bomb-making facilities and technical specialists. But they had also discovered evidence of a more extensive terrorist network with operational cells throughout the region and contingency plans for sustained attacks over an extended period. Volkov himself remained at large with unknown remaining resources and demonstrated ability to adapt quickly to federal interference. Rodriguez compiled after-action reports from all tactical operations while coordinating with bomb disposal specialists who were examining and neutralizing explosive devices recovered from multiple locations. The total quantity of explosive materials suggested preparation for attacks significantly larger than intelligence estimates had indicated. Chun continued analysis of communication intercepts and recovered intelligence materials to identify additional network elements and potential targets that might require federal protection or surveillance. The pattern of Volkov's planning suggested systematic preparation for attacks designed to create maximum economic disruption and psychological trauma. Mitchell maintained electronic surveillance on communication networks associated with Volkov's activities while searching for indications of regrouping or alternative operational planning. The network's demonstrated resilience suggested continued threat despite significant tactical losses in personnel and equipment. Elena prepared comprehensive intelligence briefing for federal supervisors while considering recommendations for continued operations against Volkov's extended network. The immediate threat to Seattle had been neutralized, but the broader terrorist infrastructure remained largely intact and capable of future attacks. Morrison coordinated debriefing activities while managing information flow to prevent intelligence compromise through the suspected federal mole who had never been identified despite extensive investigation. The security breach remained a significant vulnerability that could affect future operations against Volkov's network. Elena's role in the operation was officially concluded with the prevention of immediate attacks against Seattle targets, but her expertise in Volkov's methods and network structure made her continued involvement valuable for extended operations. The choice between returning to civilian life and continuing counter-terrorism work required careful consideration of personal costs against professional obligations. Patricia Williams called during the afternoon to check on Elena's well-being. After hearing news reports about terrorist activities in Seattle, Elena appreciated the genuine concern, but realized that her cover identity could never be safely resumed given Volkov's knowledge of her civilian location and activities. The coffee shop that had represented peaceful civilian life now stood as a reminder of what was lost when duty required sacrificing personal happiness for larger objectives. Elena would need to establish a new identity in a different location. If she chose to pursue civilian life after completion of extended operations against Volkov's network. But the mathematics remained unchanged from her initial decision to join Morrison's operation. Innocent people deserve the chance to live normal lives without fear of terrorist attacks. Preventing such attacks required people willing to sacrifice their own normalcy for the safety of others. Elena made her choice with the same methodical analysis she brought to every significant decision. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the broader mission remained incomplete. She would continue hunting Dmitry Volkov until his network was completely dismantled and the threat to innocent civilians was permanently eliminated. Morrison accepted her decision with the understanding of someone who had made similar choices throughout his career. Extended operations would require months of work across multiple jurisdictions, with no guarantee of ultimate success. But the alternative was accepting continued terrorist attacks against civilian targets. Shun prepared intelligence briefings for expanded operations while Rodriguez coordinated tactical support from federal assets across the Pacific Northwest. Mitchell established electronic surveillance networks to monitor communication activities and track personnel movements associated with Volkov's extended network. Elena reviewed the scope of their mission while considering the personal costs of continued operational work. She had chosen duty over personal happiness because the mathematics of the situation made any other choice morally impossible. Hundreds of innocent people were alive that morning because she had been willing to sacrifice the peaceful civilian life she valued above all other considerations. The hunt for Dmitry Volkov would continue until his terrorist network was completely neutralized and the threat to innocent civilians was permanently eliminated. Elena understood that such work might require years rather than months, but some responsibilities transcended personal preference. Somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, Volkov was rebuilding his operational capability while planning attacks that would kill innocent people in pursuit of ideological objectives. Elena intended to find him before he could execute those plans, regardless of how long the hunt required or what it cost her personally. The mathematics were simple, even if the emotional cost was enormous. Her happiness measured against the lives of innocent strangers balanced itself in favor of continued service. Some choices were difficult not because they were complicated, but because they required sacrificing what you wanted most for what was morally necessary. Elena prepared for extended operations with the systematic attention that had defined her professional life before civilian exile. The hunt would continue until Volkov's network was completely dismantled, and the threat to innocent people was permanently eliminated. The peaceful civilian life she had built in Seattle was over, but the work that gave her life meaning had begun. Again, in the end, that was legacy enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.